So, good morning and welcome to Japanese Politics 101, everybody. It is the Sunday morning call of Japan Expert Insights. It is hosted by me, Maya Matsuoka, and today again we've got Timothy Langley, CEO and Representative Director of Langley Esquire, a consultancy firm in Tokyo specializing in public affairs. Since we are here at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning, I would like to tell you that the analytics of previous rooms tell us that most of the audience join at around 10:30, and we still have the question whether to start this room at 8 o'clock or 8:30 so that people who tend to join later don't miss the beginning of the conversation. So at the end of this room, we would appreciate your input about whether you would like to have the room open at 8 o'clock or 8:30 or even later, let's say 9 o'clock. Of course, we are not giving you the option of 12 o'clock noon, so sorry for this, but hopefully we can have some more people tell us what is better for you. And today we're going to talk about 5 different topics. They are the vaccine rollout in Japan, the Olympics, the economy, the parliament, and the military bases in Okinawa, as per the request of one of our listeners last week. Thank you very much for coming again. And now, Timothy, could you please go ahead?
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. Thanks very much for the great promo this week, Maya. I feel like I have to really recreate the presentation to match the promotional stuff that went out.
With the thunders, yes.
Sorry. Yes. Today I'm going to talk about maybe 5 basic buckets. They're not completely reflective of what we talked about last week, but I'd like to talk about Okinawa because that was raised as an issue. Could you please describe and just kind of explain the situation in Okinawa for us? Gary asked us last week. I'd like to push that at the end. I don't see Gary on the list yet, so I'd like to push that on the end, and I'd like to talk today in kind of broad terms so that I can generate a bit of feedback from everybody else about what's going on in Japanese politics that's important to you now that you need to know about, you need to be able to follow, because it's kind of a precursor of other things that are likely to happen. So I'm going to talk about vaccines, I'm going to talk about the Olympics, I'm going to talk about the Japanese economy, I'm going to talk about what's going on in the diet and the politics of what's going on in the current diet session. And then finally, I'm going to talk about geopolitics a bit. There's a lot going on there. And then after that, I'd like to talk a little bit about Okinawa and the percentage of troops that are there and why they're there, and the controversies that perennially come up between U.S. and Japan. The U.S.-Japan relationship. So first of all, the vaccines, as everybody knows, unless you're dead and living under a rock, the vaccines are beginning to take a little bit of traction here. The last time we talked, it was less than 2% of the population had been vaccinated. The Prime Minister went on TV and said, by the end of June, I want to have the majority of people 65 years and older vaccinated. That's about 36 million people. That's something that he's kind of promised. I mean, he said it, so people will hold his feet to the fire. And that's pretty aggressive. So you'll notice that now all of a sudden they're rolling out the fire departments. They're using universities and the large corporations as potential vaccine centers. And it's not just the worker, it's also, your family can come too. It's really starting to take traction. And as we all know, it just takes so much time to get anything done in this country. But once it starts getting going, it usually rolls pretty smoothly. And I think we're seeing that in action now. So we can anticipate the vaccines rolling out much more aggressively. We're still, Japan is still at the lowest of the OECD countries. We're at the bottom. But it's not because we don't have the vaccines. We have so many vaccines that we've actually shipped 1 million of them to Taiwan 2 days ago with a lot of fanfare. That was well appreciated, good, bilateral relationship building between the Japanese government and Taiwan. I'd like to get into that a little bit more at the end of my talk. But even now, with the self-defense forces, the fire departments, the medical profession, the dentists getting involved in it, it's still looking it's looking better than it used to look. I think the Japanese population is getting a lot more comfortable with it, but it is rubbing up against. It's not like other countries because we have the Olympics to confront as well. That's at the end of July it starts. So still the issue of spectators and all these foreign athletes and their entourages coming with them. It's a kind of a scary prospect, especially if you're highly risk averse, as the Japanese typically are. But in any event, the vaccines are being pushed into the stream of. Not stream of commerce, but into the stream of municipalities, and the national government is behind that. So I think I'm hearing from a lot of my friends who are 65 years and older that they've received the postcard from the ward office, and many of them have already received that booster, that first booster. The only problem here is that with so much of a quick rollout, it enhances the chances of mistakes and things not going so well. So just be on the lookout for that. With things happening at such a quick pace, at an artificially fast pace, mistakes will be made. Not everybody is. How difficult is it to give somebody a shot in the arm? But to be fair, all of the people who are administering the shots, I think a lot of them are being trained on an accelerated basis. But that's happening elsewhere too. It doesn't look like there's much of a problem there. But it is a bit of a dicey situation in light of everything else that's going on. Some of the things that I'm going to be talking about later. But anyway, that's the snapshot on vaccines. They'll be rolling out. They've got another dose that is fit for the younger teens, which is not a huge issue, but apparently the variants from India in particular, which are virulent and not as deadly, but they spread faster. So there's a lot of that going on. You might have noticed that there was a plane load of people coming in from, I think, Malaysia. So everybody's on high alert. They had lots of police, lots of people in medical suits. When the airplanes came in, the people disembarked, and one of the passengers kind of skirted away and jumped into a car where her father was waiting to get the hell out. Was just sick of the waiting and the tension. But they were captured before they left the airport lounge, not the lounge, but the parking area, and it caused a big brouhaha. So there's a lot of security, a lot of tension going on here, and it's something just to keep an eye on. With that, I'd like to close vaccines, see if there's any questions or comments, so that we can move briskly through the other four. Anybody have questions or concerns?
While we are waiting about people to come up with questions, I have a question to you. So there is a lot of news about Japan exporting vaccines to Taiwan, and also next it will be Vietnam. So probably it's a little bit off topic, but do you think that this is a kind of a vaccine diplomacy Japan is trying to actually develop at this point of time, and then let's say just strengthen its position here in the region as a country which can help, smaller.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a great question. So maybe I think you were involved in it, Maya. We did a webinar on vaccine diplomacy, not on Japan Expert Insights, on a different webinar, and talked about the power of vaccine diplomacy and how the United States is playing it as well. But the Japanese are particularly good at this soft power. So among all of the countries, purchasing the vaccines, the Japanese had a surplus. They had so much of the vaccines already purchased and ordered and in stockpile here in Japan. They just weren't rolling it out. So it's very curious. There are a lot of underground stories about why this happened and why the rollout was very slow. But yes, taking 1.2 million vaccines and shipping them to Taiwan. I mean, the Taiwanese weren't that scared because COVID did not hit them, strangely enough, as hard as it hit other countries. And so everybody was marveling about how Taiwan was doing. And then all of a sudden, it hit with a flurry. They were unprepared, and Japan sent them a plane load of vaccines. It arrived on, I think, Thursday night with a lot of fanfare, as one would expect. So I think it's good in relationship building. It also reflects a little bit on what we frequently talk about on this in this room about the geopolitics, what's going on with Taiwan and China and the Quad, the relationship between the United States and Japan, Australia, India, and how they're going to deal with a potential incident in the South China Sea. So a lot of this stuff is, everything makes sense in some context. And so, hopefully in this room, we're talking about those things that begin to make sense if you keep following the room from week to week. Because, what's going on in Taiwan, what's going on in China and Hong Kong, it's critically important to us here in Japan, because nothing's going to happen in this region without deeply involving Japan. And that's one of the reasons why I guess Gary wanted to talk a little bit about Okinawa and the role of Okinawa in the protection and defense of Japan. But I hope that responds somewhat to your question, Maya.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? We good?
Okay, yes, we are good. Once again, just before you start with the next topic, please, everybody in the audience, feel free to raise your hand. Let us know that you have a comment or, well, even a question, or you can openly say, I disagree with what you're saying. That's okay with us. No problem at all. So we can...
No, you can't. No, you can't. You can't do that.
No way? Oh, okay, sorry then. But anyway, so let's see. Please feel free to let us know that you have something to say. So please go ahead, yes.
Okay, so let me move on to my next issue. And like Maya was saying, sometimes it's hard to raise a question except in the context of a wider dialogue. So waiting until the end, I'm going to try and fly through these really quickly so that we can preserve as much time as possible for a dialogue later. So the Olympics. I guess you're watching the news as much as anybody else is, but the Olympics are approaching. We are about 6 weeks away. And some of these municipalities and the host cities are starting to get cold feet. You've noticed that. That's one of the reasons why we talked about the dichotomy between the central government in Tokyo and how they spit out orders and executive decisions, and it goes into the various prefectures, and from the prefectures into the cities, the villages, towns, cities throughout. And the national government has a certain amount of power. It doesn't have all the power. So there's frequently tension between the central government and the governors, for example, and within the cities and the governors of that particular prefecture. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. It also has an inflection on my discussion about Okinawa as well. So it's always something to keep in mind that, although it's a centralized government, things are decided here. The ministries have incredible power to dictate to the rest of the nation. It's not fully exercisable. So with regard to the hosting cities for the training camps and welcoming for the various teams that are coming in, these cities and host, it's just funny. You almost have to shake your head. And the reality is very sad. They're pulling out. They're saying, look, we know that we had accommodations for the 80 people that were coming, the 80 athletes, and we've reserved, gymnasiums for you, and the whole city is ready. We've already distributed brochures about, your country and about, how to say hello in your language and things like that. They really put a lot of effort into it. And to be pulling out now because they're just terrified. They're terrified that with these new people coming in, they're going to be bringing COVID, and of course everybody in the municipality is going to die. But it's kind of the way things are here. So I think there are about 78 of these cities and these host communities that have canceled. 78, that's a lot. The athletes are therefore somewhat reluctant to come into Japan, even in light of that, but probably train a little bit more in their home country, come into Japan a little bit closer to their competition date, not have as much time to acclimate, but probably that is the rollout. In previous rooms, we've talked about, will the Olympics be held? Will they be canceled? That's still an open ticket. Even though we're so close to it, there are a lot of things that are going on. So the first team to come to Japan was the Australian women's softball team. They arrived on Monday of this week. And they had a lot of news about that because it was the first time for them to come in. Plus, it was a women's team. Plus, it was from Australia. And so it's always a good news story. But the next day they were talking about, the municipalities being very nervous and not enough doctors in the various districts, not to say nothing of, the doctors here in Tokyo who have volunteered for supplementing what's going on in the Olympics. But, unfortunately, a team from Ghana, and that is not the chocolate, that is the country, Ghana came in. The team came in, they passed through Narita. They went to their assigned training city, and then one of the athletes tested positive for COVID. So this is really bad because it's just a suggestion. And all you need sometimes is just a suggestion. Now we're all going to die, of course, because somebody from Ghana came in and tested positive. So it's just people will draw their own conclusions, and the athletes are only now starting to come in. So it's a very delicate time. In this regard, the governors, again, we have this dichotomy between the national government and the local governments. The governments are seeking the national government to give them more ability, or to actually from on high say there are more restricted elements of the lockdown, not the lockdown, but keeping people close and quiet and not spreading the virus. So the governors are seeking, even though it's in a state of emergency, even though it only covers 10 prefectures, the governors themselves are in a bit of a panic and requesting the Japanese government to either authorize them to issue, or to issue on a national basis, tighter restrictions. And like I said, the Union of Medical Doctors and Nurses is staunchly behind protecting their union members. And so there's a lot of backlash or resistance to the national government about holding the Olympics. So it's still a coin toss. We're getting awful close to it. There are some people that you'll talk to that will say, absolutely, it is going to happen because there are too many companies that are invested in it. And even if there are no spectators, we still get the branding right. So, a lot of the reason why these companies have done that is for the branding and for the luster of the Olympics. The only problem with that is that should things go bad, then the negative inflection is also there. It's a negative for, selling your product, the cars or the televisions on Olympic advertisements. Should things go south, and that's the great fear. Although I can't even remark on the potential of that, if it's high or low. But yeah, it's a new game here, and a lot of things can happen. And I think in a country like Japan, with the economy the way it is, it's really a tough decision. So I have nothing further to say about that. My prediction is not as strong as it was last week. My prediction is last week, as you might recall, was I think it'll get canceled. If I was pushed to say one way or the other, I think it'll get canceled. Now we're 1 week closer to it, and I'm more towards the 50-50. So with that, I'd like to close that up. Ask for any questions, and then move on to my last three topics. Okay, after a gulp of coffee, let me go on to the economy. So we haven't talked much about the economy in this room. The economy is a big component, but we only have an hour on this room. We try and have an hour. We typically go over an hour and a half. Last week we went an hour and 45 minutes, which is fine with me. But we rarely talk about the economy. And the economy is important because it's part of Japanese politics, the supplementary budget, the third or the fourth one that they will issue, how the Japanese government decides on monetary policy, employment, how the distribution of vaccines, a lot of things. But the economy is pretty critical and central to that. And if you're following the numbers, it's not looking very good. And maybe that is one of the reasons why the energy is being pushed to hold the Olympics, because the economy can't suffer that much of a hit. At the same time, you could say, well, COVID is, the restrictions imposed by COVID is punishing the economy, and it doesn't need to, because even if everybody catches COVID, the number of deaths are going to be so small. It's this tension between the number of deaths and having the economy survive. And in Japan in particular, the economy is not doing very well. You'll remember that in the first quarter, there was a 5.1% decline in GDP annualized, and we're in the second month of the second quarter. So the numbers will be coming out, but it doesn't look good. You take a look at the employment figures. So finally, it's like something bad happens, and it takes a couple of months, and all of a sudden, for example, suicides start peaking. So it's not at the beginning or in the middle. It kind of comes at the tail end when people get really sick and tired and get frustrated, and then all of a sudden things happen. The same thing with the economy. So now we're beginning to see companies reluctant to expand or hire more people. So the jobless rate is beginning to increase. It's higher among men than it is among women. Many countries would be envious of Japan's unemployment rate. It's about 3.5% for men this last month. Many countries have 10%, but for Japan it's too outstanding. That's too high. But it looks like in the next month release of employment, it's going to be even worse. Even though the Olympics are being run, it's going to have just a tiny impact on employment figures. But that is something to watch and to be mindful of. So, the number of jobs that are out there compared to the number of job seekers, it's really growing. And there are a lot of people that are out looking for work with no really viable opportunity to work in the near term. and that's particularly with hospitality, food services, that sort of thing, and they're just getting hammered. The Bank of Japan has announced more monetary easing, which having an inflation rate. Mr. Kuroda, who is the chief executive of the Bank of Japan, has long promised at least a 2% inflation rate. Inflation is good for the economy as long as it's capped. He's never been able to achieve that, and in spite of that, the Japanese economy, the portion of GDP that's distributed to debt, is continuing to increase. So it's probably 270% of GDP is associated with debt, and that number is beginning to increase. And with the amount of money that's being pushed into the economy, the price of goods and services and food is going to be increasing in the near term. So this is something that we should keep an eye on. I'll try and develop it a little bit better in my next room because I think it'll flare up. There's some numbers that are expected to come out in the next 2 weeks, but I think the economy is a big part of political decision making. So I think we should just keep an eye on that. With that, I'd like to close the economy and move on to my remaining three topics. If there are any questions or issues. Lovely. Let's talk about the diet. So there's a lot going on the diet, and if we're talking about Japanese politics, you would think that this is the first thing that we talk about. It kind of is, but what's going on in the diet is only a reflection of what's going on in the wider society. So there is some ability to manage and control that, and sometimes things that happen inside the diet reflect on how Japanese society works and how people make decisions. So it's important. It is not the tail wagging the dog, but it is something that's important in following. So the diet is in session now. It will finish its session on June 16th. That will be the end of this diet session. So there's a lot of fireworks that are coming down the path. And let me just explain that to you so you can be prepared for it as you watch what happens in the press. If you're watching, following the Japan Times or something like that, you'll start to see these stories coming up. So today is the 6th, is it? The 6th or the 7th? Today's the 6th.
The 6th.
So we've got 10 more days before the diet session ends. In that time, the opposition parties have an opportunity to attack the government. It's a part of the diet process. So they go through the 150-day session, and towards the end of it, they have an opportunity for the opposition to quiz the administration and to ask questions, and they're in the hot seat. So that's coming up on June 6th. The debate will be the administration, and you've seen it on TV. It happens in the budget hearing room. It's always the same room. And the prime minister sits down, and he's usually joined with members of his cabinet for that day on the questions that will be raised. And usually those questions are submitted in writing, and then they get to ask them verbally, and then the person who is being quizzed, either the prime minister or one of the ministers, is supposed to respond. And that goes on for a couple of days, and it just occupies the airwaves. It's publicized, or it's televised live on television. And there is a great energy from the opposition to call a no confidence motion. They don't quite have the numbers. They don't quite have the cohesion, but they will make a lot of heat out of that. And there's a lot of things that they can talk about that are negative to the government. So these things will start coming up. You might have, among the many things, you might have noticed that a former METI minister resigned yesterday. He handed in his badge. He resigned from, he resigned from the LDP earlier, so he became Mushokuzin, a member without party affiliation. And then he waited quite a while to resign from the Diet. That was accepted yesterday. That will be a bone of contention for a lot of reasons. You might remember the 3 by-elections we had about 4 weeks ago, where the LDP was running a candidate in 3 prefectural races and lost all 3 of them. And all 3 of them, 2 of the 3 were tainted by LDP bribery accusations and actually convictions. So this one here is also, the minister he resigned because they call it taking bribes, but it's more like, taking campaign contributions outside of the realm of what is legitimate. So that is coming up. You'll also recall that, one of the favorite individuals we like to talk about is Kono Taro. The foreign community in particular likes him as a potential leader of Japan. He's young, he's aggressive, he's something of a maverick. His English is impeccable. He went to Georgetown University. He's very well known. He's well known in the Japanese community as well, but he's just a little bit younger than people like for a political leader. He hasn't had any LDP political position within the LDP, but he's had 3 ministerial portfolios. He's on TV all the time. He looks good. He sounds good. And when people talk about candidates for the new prime minister, his name always comes up. Well, a funny thing happened the other day that so there are 2 very popular rags about Japanese politics. One is Bunshun, and the other is Shincho. These 2 magazines, they're called, rags because they come out every week. They're somewhat scandalous. They used to have, pictures of, actresses and famous girls, scantily clothed in the first couple of pages. But it's a popular vehicle for talking about news and gossip, and it really does provide great information. It's not as clean as what you'd get in Nikkei or maybe even the Japan Times, as colored as that is, but it's raw. And a lot of the information they have is very accurate and compelling. Anyway, it's a hit piece on Kono Taro, and it's only episode 1 of 2 episodes that they tell the readers, this is just part 1, and they always hold this juicy part for part 2. So if you're Kono Taro, you're feeling very intimidated. These rags have a lot of access, and people who have a bone to pick with you, they can go to the writers of these articles and feed them information. And since it's a direct source, it's almost always accurate. So Kono Taro, you will notice this next week and perhaps the week afterwards, his luster is going to fall a little bit. And this is by design. So there, you might remember the prime minister, the former prime minister, Mr. Abe, said, there are 3 guys that I like for prime minister. And Kono Taro wasn't there, and a couple of the other people that, Mr. Koizumi, the younger Koizumi, was not there. They're the kind of old boys that are already in the cabinet and are favorites of Mr. Abe. So him going into a magazine and talking about that, it's powerful for Mr. Abe to say something like that. And there are people that say, well, how about Kono Taro? Well, this is a hit piece that's kind of designed to have people talk less about Kono Taro than they might normally. So there's a lot to be looking forward to within the next couple of days, and also before we have our next meeting next week. Also, there's stuff going on in the United States and in Russia that will have an inflection on what's going on here in Japan too. But the Olympics are going to weigh heavily into Japanese politics, and the fact that the opposition has a chance to beat up the opposition, administration this week is something that will carry ammunition into the next week. So, just to encapsulate the whole thing that's going on here, you know that the prime minister must close down the House before the end of September. Constitutionally, it's directed he has to do that. If he doesn't do it, just by rule of law, the lower house will end. Everybody goes up for election, and then they get voted, and then they start a new parliament. In conjunction with that, the LDP must select a new prime minister. So that has to occur. The dates are not the same day, so the prime minister can call the date for the House election earlier, and the LDP can call the election for the prime minister earlier too. So the lineup now, they've already published what the outline is going to be, is at the middle of September, there will be a State of the Union by Mr. Suga. He'll talk about how wonderful things are. He'll also announce another supplementary budget, which will have a lot more new money for supply chain, for semiconductors, for defense, for all of these things that we talk about from time to time in this room. And then he will close the House towards the end of September. There will be an election there. Hopefully, the LDP will win or at least stay stable. And then the LDP will call an election for prime minister. So everything that's happening now, even the election for the Tokyo municipal government, so the municipal Tokyo elections will end on July 4th. So you've got the Tokyo municipal elections, then you've got the Olympics, then you've got Mr. Suga making his State of the Union, the supplementary budget, closing down the House, the election for the House, and then election for prime minister. All of those are pretty much lined up now. So everything that's happening, all of these things that we talk about are all geared towards that. Mr. Suga wants to continue to be prime minister, but not everybody is in line with that. And you will see, how that rolls out in all of these things, how much he gets beat up in the Diet this next week, how much support Mr. Abe is giving him. If Mr. Abe wants him to stay there, he'll probably stay there. The prospect of Mr. Abe coming back out of the woods and being prime minister, I was pretty hot on that about 2 weeks ago. Last week I was a little bit neutral. This week, I think he would probably stay in the background. If you're wondering if Mr. Abe is going to have a comeback, the answer there is he's already back. He's already back. He's just not back as a minister or as an active person in the obvious running of the government, but he is back and he's calling the shots and he's collecting money, and he's going to pretty much dictate how things roll out at the election, and also for who's going to be prime minister. So keep your eye on that. I think I've gone on a long time on the Diet portion. I'd like to close right now, see if there are any questions.
May I?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. My first question, I have two questions to you, and my first question is about the vote of no confidence by the opposition party. Does it mean that if they have that notion of no confidence, that there will be elections even earlier than September, or not? I mean, it's not very clear, I think.
Yes.
Probably a lot of people wonder how it is.
Okay, so a vote of no confidence means that there's a large enough portion of the members who don't believe what the prime minister is doing, or disagree with a particular policy or a decision or maybe a scandal, and they say, look, we just can't work with you. So it's a parliamentary democracy. So the prime minister is not, he's the prime minister. He's not the president. So he has to rule through the cabinet with the approval of the members of the Diet, particularly the members of the lower house, because there are more numbers there than there are with the upper house. And so a vote of no confidence means that there's a large enough portion of those members who just don't feel confident that they can move forward. So they have the ability to call in no confidence, and that closes down the government. But it's a big hurdle. The opposition, even collectively, doesn't have the numbers to do it because the LDP has a coalition with Komeito. They have a majority in the lower house, and they have a supermajority in the upper house. So it doesn't seem likely, but it's a good tactic to kind of throw mud at people, and you can expect that too, because what's going on in the national Diet has a reflection on what's going on with Tokyo politics, because the LDP is very prominent in Tokyo politics too. So if the fight is, please vote for me, I'm helping Koike, clean up the streets and make Shinjuku really livable, and I'm an LDP member, that could be a little bit of a detriment based on what's happening now, if you can follow.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for that. And my second question is, you said today again that the Tokyo municipal government elections will be on July 4th. And of course, probably this is a very small possibility, but there is still a possibility that Ms. Koike loses the elections there, right? And my question is, if it happens, what are the chances of her once again, opting to be a candidate for prime minister, let's say?
It's a good question. There's so many ifs that kind of, if there's a yes no, so many of the ifs have the no button. So first of all, let's say the Tokyo Olympics, the Tokyo metropolitan elections don't go very well. The chances of that are very low. She is a strong governor. She's well liked. She has some detractors, but I think overall the people of Tokyo are satisfied with her. Some people are not so happy with her decision making and her ruling, but compared to former governors, she is head and heels above that. She's female. In COVID, there are a lot of positives going with that. So I don't see her not doing well in the Tokyo Olympics. With regard to her becoming prime minister, you skipped a couple of steps there. And a couple of those steps, some of them have yes buttons and some of them have no buttons. So in order for her to become prime minister, first of all, she has to be a member of the Diet. So the Tokyo Olympics, the Tokyo elections will start this month with election on July 4th. There's 10 days of election campaigning. So today is the 6th. So in another 2 weeks, you'll start seeing the billboards going up on all of the corners in the neighborhoods with the pictures of the candidates, being pasted up there. The elections will begin. The trucks will be driving through the streets. People will be waving out of the open windows with gloved hands, and there'll be lots of speeches on top of trucks. Assuming she wins that election, that means she wins. She's got to win her seat, but that is an election for the Tokyo municipal government. That ends in July 4th. Then we have the Olympics, and then maybe the closing down of the House very quickly after that for members of the lower house. So what she would have to do is she's going to run the elections for Tokyo. She's going to say, it's Tokyo first. I'm behind you, and please run for this. Please vote for this candidate because this is my good friend. And then she resigns afterwards, after winning the Olympic, the election, and she tells everybody, I'm going to I'm going to run for the lower house. Some people would feel betrayed by that. They'll feel like she utilized them for her own personal gain. So first of all, she has to win an election as a member of the lower house, which she will easily do. She becomes a member of the lower house, but now to become a prime minister, I mean, how many days are there going to be between the election of the lower house and when the LDP decides to have an election for prime minister? There's just not enough time there, and she doesn't have enough of a groundswell. Nikai, so there's another layer of power that's going on, a fight of power between Nikai and Mr. Abe. So there seems to be a break in that relationship, and Mr. Abe is not very fond of Ms. Koike, but Mr. Nikai is. And when Mr. Suga was appointed as president, that was all due to Mr. Nikai. And then he quickly moved to put his own people into positions of power within the LDP. And it's taken a bit of time. It took it knocked the wind out of everybody else because it happened so quickly. And it was a kind of a fait accompli. But now people have had a chance to think about it and look at what Mr. Nikai has done and how he's kind of, packing his own nest. So there's a lot of factionalism that's growing now. So it is possible that Mr. Nikai could get his favorite, Miss Koike, to come in, and he helps become the kingmaker. But with Mr. Abe, Amari, and some of the other power brokers in the LDP, I see that as very, very remote. It comes up from time to time because Ms. Koike has said, I would like to be prime minister at some point, but I just don't think it's feasible. I hope that responds.
Yes, thank you. And Hayato, thank you very much for coming up.
Oh, hi. I'd like to just add to Timothy's comment about Mr. Abe being back. So Mr. Abe already built a fundraising machine, and the fundraising has been taking place. So as Timothy knows, so it's a matter of time, as to he's going to gain the power, right? Or he already gained the power. Then he's the only one that, as far as I know, that's doing a serious fundraise. So he's going to be in the power. Then, but I'm pretty sure he does not want to go back to to be the king that get hit by the media all day long. So he may become the kingmaker, or he may become the king. It's up to him, but he'll be the leader. That's the view that I'm hearing. I'm done talking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it was you or me, that's what we would do too. Why be in the limelight and take all the bullets when you can have somebody else? And you're in the background. I think that's history has shown that Japanese prime ministers, their power increases after they're prime minister, and it's not as hard on your health. Similarly, it's a bit of a diversion too, but similarly with Koike, why would somebody give up the position as governor of Tokyo, the largest city in the world, to be in national politics, to have to be answerable to the kind of things that the prime minister will go up against this next week in the budget room. She's the governor of Tokyo, and the dynamics of the governor compared to the prime minister are just so vast. They're both hard jobs, but I think the prime minister's job is much, much more difficult. And she's already achieved fame and glory, I think, as governor of Tokyo. I can't see the great benefit to that, as I can't see Mr. Abe, the great benefit going to him for being yet again prime minister. I think it would just be too tough. Hello, Fumi.
Hey, Timothy-san. Good morning. Hi, my-san. I've got two questions today. One is about Olympics. The Australian softball team came in. I'm just wondering if they are vaccinated or not. if you know.
Yes, all of them were vaccinated. So that was a question when they had a lot of there's just a lot of interest in the Australian softball team, just because they were the first team to come in. So I think, strangely enough, one of the most watched games will be the softball, only because of that. Who was really that interested in it, but they performed really well. The women athletes are very compelling. They're coming from Australia, so what's not to like? And yes, all of them were vaccinated.
Cool. That's a good way to hear. And the second question is about the economy, Japanese economy. Today, I think this morning, I've seen the news. Yamamoto Taro from Reiwa Shinsengumi, and also I think Mabuchi from Riken Minshuto have sort of issued a sort of agreed statement that they are going to make a policy for reducing consumption tax to 5%. Last week, you used the word Japanese people need to buckle up for the to be prepared for the Great Recession. If this after the Olympic, if there's a huge recession and sort of there's a sort of big huge election there too. Do you think if opposition parties get united and sort of issue, okay, let's reduce the consumption tax to 5%. Do you think it's gonna be like huge sort of game changer? I mean, to reduce the tax to 5%. If you can answer that would be great.
Sure. So I think, thanks for the question, Fumi, and best regards to your chickens, by the way. So the 5% reducing, we're at 10% now, reducing it back to 5%. That's huge. And if that was a big issue, it would be a campaign issue. It's coming a little bit late for that to be a campaign issue for the opposition parties. But even if it is a big issue, let's say we finish Q2 and the Japanese GDP is yet again down, and so we are formally in a recession. If the opposition party begins to build steam, the administration, Mr. Taro Aso, finance minister, will steal that. They'll steal that initiative, and they'll just say, look, we have deemed it kind and gentle to the Japanese population that we're going to unilaterally reduce the consumption tax to, they probably wouldn't go to 5%. They might go to 8 or 7. But I don't think it's not developed enough. There's not enough time to make it a campaign issue, which would be a great campaign issue. Vote for us because we are the parties that are trying to defend and protect the consumer and get us out of this horrible mess that Mr. Suga has gotten us into. That's kind of a nice rallying call, but I just don't think it has enough wind to it right now. The likelihood of them reducing it, it is so hard to get the consumption tax up that I think that they just love it too much. It provides too much wealth for the government to run so many of the programs. I mean, so much money is being spent on the social programs that they really do need the consumption tax to help pay for that. And the argument here is you're getting the consumption tax, but it's a damper on the economy. You could be increasing the economy and getting more money, even though you have a lower tax rate, if you just bolster the amount of money that is being generated. That's the argument. Maybe that has appeal, after the Olympics, after the elections, under new leadership, maybe in December, January, February. Probably that timing, it might come up. I agree with you, but I just don't think it's a good election call right now.
Thank you, Timothy. So if the reduction in the consumption tax is not the campaign issue, what will be the campaign issues for this election in September?
It hasn't come up yet. It might come up. The election hasn't started. We've got another maybe 12, 15 days before elections start. and I haven't seen any manifestos published yet, but it could be you guys screwed up with the vaccines. You guys delayed it. You had stockpiles of vaccines, and you guys are the party of corruption. The Meti minister, he resigned because of corruption. The fellow in Hokkaido, he was also a former agriculture minister, and he took a lot of money from the egg producer from Akita. And then you've got the Anli couple in Kyoto, and those guys took money, and they both resigned as members of parliament. You guys are so corrupt and filthy, and so we want the cleaner party. Komeito is the clean party. Komeito is in a coalition with the LDP, so the LDP kind of burnishes this issue by being, affiliated with Komeito, right? Even though we're the LDP, we're money grubbing, big company, big blue corporate guys. We're kinder and gentler because we have Komeito. It would be a hard sell, but the opposition parties, they have attempted on many occasions to come together. There have been attempts. They haven't been very successful, and the LDP is just so much bigger. So if the distinction of the LDP losing that political power and them just losing the election, those are different things. So them losing the election means that they've lost a couple of seats, that they haven't maintained parity before the election and after the election. That's how they lose the election. It's not that they lose more than 50%. That's highly unlikely. But them losing enough seats for people to say, well, that's because of Mr. Suga's leadership, and that's why the LDP is not the best party to go forward. But after the election, the LDP would still be in power. The LDP would still select the prime minister. That's my view.
Thank you, Timothy-san. Much appreciated. See you next week.
Thank you, Kumi. Hello, Gary.
Good morning, and good morning, Maya. I wanted to say thanks for again hosting the room. I have 3 questions pertaining to money. There's an old saying, follow the money in American politics, and you'll see where the real power lies. And I was wondering what role big money plays in politics here in Japan. The second question is concerning the recent G7 meeting, in which they've agreed to commit to a global minimum corporate tax of at least 15%. And what's Japan's interest in that? And then the third, which I just read, is what's your take on the Bank of Japan buying $300 billion worth of stocks and becoming the largest, the biggest single shareholder of Japanese stocks?
Same-o. So, Gary, thanks very much. Actually, we were going to talk a little bit about Okinawa. You raised the Okinawa issue. You didn't sign on, so you get 3 demerits when we first opened the room. But we're going to talk about Okinawa at some point today, so I'm glad you're signed on. We also talked a little bit about the economy, so you get another 3 demerits there. Yes, Japan purchasing these assets, they have to do that to compensate for the amount of money that they're pumping out into the economy for the supplementary budget. So the same thing happens in the United States too. And follow the money. It's not what happens in U.S. politics. It's what happens in politics. It's human nature. So people are always curious because I worked in Japanese politics, and I worked for a member of the parliament, and money is exchanged all the time. It is how politics is lubricated, and there are laws and regulations to make that legitimate and to have full disclosure. So the way that people get into trouble is they don't have full disclosure. That's what happened with the Miti minister who just resigned yesterday. He turned in his badge. He was getting money on the side and he didn't report it. The Shukan Bunshun article that was produced on Thursday, it always comes out on Thursday, that was a hit piece on Kono Taro also revealed his failure to adequately report the amount of money that he got from people who jumped on buses to come into Tokyo and get a tour of the Diet and lunch in the inside the Parliament building, and then go have the bus back home. They paid for that, but there's no record of the money being received and documented. It's not a lot of money, but it is, it's illegal. You're supposed to record that. So he's being jumped on for that. And in part two, there's probably something else more scandalous coming out just to diminish his luster. So, the Japanese government is in trouble, not just because of the amount of assets that they're purchasing to be on the other side of the balance sheet from the money that they're distributing, if you follow that logic, but it's also the value of the shares that they are holding falling in value as a consequence of COVID, and it's just dragging them further down this hole. It's just so terrifying and scary. They've got to do something about it, and the best thing for them to do is just to keep quiet about it. So it takes, people talking about it and thinking about it. The economy is a kind of a difficult, because it's numbers. You've got to wrap your head around it. So the reports from economists are not really great reading. It's not, riveting reading like the scandal stuff, but it is important to keep following. So I think in this room we will continue to go back to the economy, because it dictates how things are going to happen. Like you said, follow the money and it'll tell you. And just in closing that part, I have to say, and it's a tiny bit tongue-in-cheek, but Japanese politics is like politics anywhere. And when you get down to it, it is disgusting what happens, how things happen, how decisions are made, how money is exchanged. But that's like making sausage. You love to eat it, you just don't want to see how it's made. And Japanese politics is like politics anywhere. When you really get down to it, yes, money is involved. Big companies are involved. Big companies have a lot of weight, a lot of power, and a lot of things are decided that are not beneficial to the state or to the people or to the greater good. And all you have to do is take a look at that bastion of freedom and democracy, the United States, and see what's going on there now with COVID and the revelations of Fauci and his involvement with COVID and the research and the payments and just the stuff that's going on there. I mean, that is just a huge scandal that's just beginning to break right now. So, and that's the United States. So in Japan, it's a little bit more opaque. It's a little bit more difficult to follow and to see what's going on. We all have difficulty. That's why this room is, I think, popular, is because people are trying to figure it out. And they just, what does it mean and how did we get where we are? And you have to have somebody that's kind of looking at it and making sense of it. And I hope I'm providing a little bit of that value. But there's an awful lot going on. I can't touch all of it, but hopefully we can, just consistently talking about this every Sunday, you get a better sense of it. Thank you for the question. I hope that responded, Gary.
Thank you.
And Sakura, good morning.
Good morning. It's 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time in the United States, California, but this morning for you. So thank you so much for holding this room. I do have a question. I don't know if it's appropriate for this particular group, this particular room, but it has to do with CBDC and Japan and the Japanese banks rolling out their own sovereign-backed crypto, along with other countries. But I'm wondering if you could answer or have any thoughts about Japan doing this so they can compete with China's CBDC that they're also rolling out and like offering it on WeChat and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sakura. So this issue came up 2 weeks ago. What was the fellow's name? I don't know if he's on the room now. He asked about the Bitcoin. And we talked a little bit about that. So the Chinese, yes, they're launching that. There's a lot of publicity. It's not going very well for them. The level of confidence that people have with the Chinese issued Bitcoin type crypto security or crypto coin is it's not receiving the fanfare that they wanted it to. But with Japan, it's all about the encryption and the security, and they haven't quite figured that out. But within a very short period of time, for people that are living here in Japan, you will see dramatic changes in how banking is done, how payments are made. There are so many things that are going to happen because Japan has lagged behind even South Korea. South Korea is far ahead in terms of a digital economy and paying for things. But I mean, just look back, 5 years ago, there were no ATMs in the 7-Elevens. Everything was, cash based. And even in a short period of 5 years, look at it now. I mean, you use your iPhone to pay for things when you go into the 7-Eleven. Almost every single 7-Eleven or Family Mart has an ATM in it. And this pace of change is going to increase, and Japan needs a cryptocurrency. The Japan Bank is looking at it very carefully. It could go to a private concern. Kind of the unfortunate thing there is that if it's a private concern, it's almost always going to be based or initiated by a foreigner, either a Swiss or an American or a German, and that doesn't bode well for the Japanese. They want their own currency, and I think that will happen eventually, but not right now. It'll probably be two years or so, maybe 3. But it does need to happen. We don't need to be carrying cash in our wallets. We don't need to be passing coins around, not because of COVID, but just because it's uneconomical and it's faster, it's cleaner, you can monitor it much better. So I think all of the arguments of going crypto are there. It's just that it takes a little bit more time. But other than that, the plans that are coming out of the Bank of Japan is just that it's under study right now. That's about all I can say about it. I hope that's somewhat responsive.
Thank you, Timothy-san. I appreciate it.
Please continue to stay tuned and keep your feet up on your desk.
Well, thank you for this. And Mayuko, thank you very much for coming up. Yes.
Good morning, Maya, Timothy, and everyone. Good morning. Thank you, as always, for this great discussion.
Good morning, Mayuko, and you're calling from Hong Kong, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So last week you talked a little bit about foreign policy, I think. And I learned from the Nikkei Asia's article last week that the new US defense budget is all China. And we've all seen that, especially when the government's not performing well, they tend to look for enemies outside to divert people's attention. So the bigger the perception or narrative or reality, depending on how you see it, of in this case, the China threat is, the more opportunity I feel for top-down and authoritarian leader to rise. And I feel that is exactly the time when we all have to make sure that there are checks and balances, so there's no abuse of power and things like that. So how do you evaluate the state of checks and balances in Japan as compared to other countries like the US? I think you have earlier talked about the whole Carlos Ghosn incident in this room and how it put a spotlight on Japan's legal system. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Wow, you just said a mouthful. So I don't know how to address the 16 issues you brought up. About yes, it is a standard ploy because it works when you're in difficulty. Do foreign policy. and it typically works. It's easier. It's not as fraught with criticism as domestic policy, but most politicians are they're really good at domestic, but they're less good at foreign policy. Gains are easier made in foreign policy than domestic policy. So when you're looking for a boost in your public ratings, you typically go overseas to do that. About the defense budget, Mr. Suga and President Biden met 3-4 weeks ago, and they had a lot of decisions there. The impact of those decisions are being rolled out. One of them was about the economy, a big issue for the Biden administration. The other was about supply chain and in particular chips. So there's already a lot of movement there. I mean, lightning speed fast that the Japanese are dedicating funds for production of semiconductors and moving the supply chain out of a reliance on China or China satellite states back to Japan or back to a more friendly Japan allies. And this issue with Taiwan and the South China Seas, it is the kind of the flashpoint that everybody is looking at. It's, if something happens, it probably is going to happen there. It could be North Korea, but less likely North Korea. More likely China, because if China wants to make a move, it can make a move and suffer fewer repercussions than in other areas. So it is important to watch that. I forget what other issues you were talking about, but
I think I just would like to, I'm curious about how you evaluate the state of checks and balances.
Oh,
in Japan.
okay.
Yeah,
So-
I think that's where I'm
Okay.
very curious about.
it's a great question, and please, for Japanese listeners, don't think that I'm being overly critical of Japan in making these observations. But in the United States, checks and balances are very well established. They're part of the Constitution, and in brief, the checks and balances is there's the executive branch, there's the legislative branch, and then there is the judicial branch. And the three of them are supposed to balance each other out, right? So if the president of the executive branch does something that irritates one of the other two, it is usually the responsibility of the legislative branch to say, we don't, what you've done is under the laws that we created and established based on this specific law we had in 1982, it is an illegal use of your power and your authority. So we are suing you, and you have to go to the third branch, which is the judicial branch, and they will make the decision. So I'll take my fight there, you take your fight there, and then they decide. That's the basic checks and balances of the United States. In Japan, it's a completely different mix. So there are more than these three branches that the power is distributed to. You've got the executive branch, which is the prime minister's office. So it's gradually rolled into this. So it's not based on the Constitution. It's based on how politics has guided it. So originally, before Mr. Koizumi became prime minister, the prime minister's office was this red brick building that was built, and the architect was Frank Lloyd Wright. Beautiful building in the same location, kind of the same location where the prime minister's residence is now. They put that on steel girders. They moved it to the corner of the lot, and then they built this massive prime minister's office. So this was a move to begin to collect power and authority within the office of the prime minister. And at the same time, you'll remember that Koizumi coalesced several of the ministries together to make fewer ministries than there were, thereby reducing or consolidating their power so that there can be more easily managed by the prime minister's office and the office of the cabinet secretary. So one of the powers, one of the functions in this power balance that you're asking about is the office of prime minister. it wasn't usually a huge consideration, but it is now. The other one is the legislative. So that's the upper house and the lower house. It has some control, but not as dominant as it might be in the United States. The third branch is the yaksho, the bureaucracies, the various ministries. But the prime minister and the office of the prime minister has basically captured that by controlling who gets appointed, who gets promoted within the various ministries. So the ministries are not promoted because of what they've done inside the ministry. That has to be approved by the prime minister's office. So now all of these bureaucrats who once just wanted to become more powerful and they wanted to have more domain in their office, they wanted to have higher elections, they wanted to get more money or whatever, so that their retirement benefits were richer and more rewarding to them. They have to kowtow now to the prime minister's office. Their promotions must be approved. So they've kind of captured that. And then the third or the fourth one, depending on how you're talking about it, is the judicial branch. And when you say that, you kind of have to stop yourself from laughing. Again, I apologize if it sounds pejorative, but the judicial branch is nowhere, it's not in the checks and balances. Nobody talks or includes the judicial branch in Japan with helping define what public policy is, or the role of government, or the infringements on freedoms. They are almost silent on that. And even when the Supreme Court does make a decision, it's so long in the making that the impact is so far beyond where the injury was that people pay so little attention to it. So checks and balances in the United States, yes, I think it's relatively healthy. Right now, you might question that with the incredible friction between the Democrats and the Republicans, but that was the design. But here in Japan, that checks and balances is it's almost completely lacking.
Thank you so much. So should we, I guess my question is, should we be more concerned about how the checks and balances in Japan are not as
absolutely
healthy as the US?
Absolutely. So
I see.
One of the problems that the United States has is a similar problem that Japan has, and that is the third estate, the newspapers and the televisions, how they report on news and happenings and the slant they give to it. So in the United States, that's almost completely been usurped. So it's not just the estate of publications and analysis of news and that sort of thing, but it's also infiltrated to the big companies like Facebook and Google. They're also involved in the refining and the massaging of information and what they believe to be true and accurate. It's kind of dictated from on high. So we've lost a lot of that. The press is not playing its role. I think that's an accurate statement. Although people who are fully behind Joe Biden and the Democratic machine might take great issue with that, but I think just on balance, you could say that. Similarly, here in Japan, Mr. Abe was very strong on dictating how news is coming out. So his appointment of who is the chairman of NHK, for example, threw a lot of water on what is being said through the news channels. And also you have the Keisha Club, the people who can come in to participate in these press briefings, especially with government officials. You have to qualify for that, and then you have to be invited, and you have to be towing the line. So I think the press has been somewhat captured. It's not talking about the things that are important. If you look at Japanese newspapers and particularly Japanese television news, in the morning, you watch the news, you watch the sports, then you watch food. How to cook this food on a morning news program, and it takes up 10 minutes of that, and then you talk about current events and what's going on. It is just it's yeah, it's a little bit disappointing.
Great, thank you so much. So I'd love to stay till the end, but I actually have to go somewhere else. So I'm going to move myself back to the audience. But thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much, and please know, I'm sure Maya will give it a plug too, that all of these rooms and these discussions are recorded and posted on Japan Expert Insights, Maya's independent webpage.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayako.
Thank
See you
so
again.
much, Maya Timothy. See you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and Tami-san, good morning.
Good morning. Well, it's been a while I spoke to you, Timothy. Long time no speak. But thank you very much, as always, for your great talks. Well, I do have, personally, I have conflicts on Sunday mornings, so I normally sit on the audience seat and then kind of quietly slip away. But regarding
Fix your priorities. Fix your priorities.
well, this morning, you are my priority.
Thank
Let's put it
you.
that way. Anyhow, regarding the Olympics, well, you said earlier on, and from the tone of your voice up till last week, you were
Yep.
rather skeptical about the Olympics going ahead, but a few days ago, we heard from Mr. Omi, who sits in a panel board of experts for COVID, that he thinks that given the current circumstances, the Olympics, if the Olympics is to go ahead, it should be downscaled. However, we've been hearing from the government, or like from Ms. Marikawa in particular, that well, there seems to be some disharmony between those experts panel and the government as a whole. So, and now to this morning, you said that if it's to go ahead, I mean, you said like now your guess is 50-50.
Right.
So, would you say that the government will still push ahead with a full scale of it, or there would be a room to downscale it? What's your take on that?
Well, I think yeah, it's kind of go, no go. And what you're asking is, if it's a go, will it be a go with downscaling?
Indeed.
And I think, yes. So I think my impression now, and Omi went on TV, I think just Friday night. He was even stronger about it, about not holding the Olympics and how irresponsible it is. And the Union for Medical Workers went on and said this is just not the right thing. It's not good for our union members. And you've got a couple of prominent individuals in Japanese society, like Beat Takeshi and Mikitani from Rakuten, and even Masahiro Son with SoftBank, saying, it shouldn't be done. And these are big guys, and they represent a voice of the Japanese population. So the funny thing is that in Japan, almost everybody has a veto voice. If you're in a Japanese business meeting and somebody doesn't like what's being said, they can stop everything. Even though there are 12 people and it's just one person, people, even, board chairmen or committee chairs are reluctant to use the power of the pulpit and say, well, we've listened to your voice and we thank you, for your opinion, but we're going to go forward. Let's have a vote. People are reluctant to do that. I think that, in fact, that's what's happened in the central government, is that they've appreciated the voice of your concern, but we're still going through with it. And they're still going through with it for a lot of calculations that we are not completely aware of. But I think part of it is, 600 Japanese companies have invested more than $3.3 billion into this Olympics. And some of these players, Panasonic, Toyota, they're on multi-year contracts with the Olympics. So it's not just a one-shot deal. They've paid for maybe 3 Olympics. So it helps them in their marketing division. It helps them with promotion and identifying athletes in the future and building up this narrative about, you know, how they're supporting the Olympics and the Olympic spirit, and how the tires that they produce are you know, favorites of, you know, this particular athlete. So it makes sense to have a multi-year kind of contract. And the contract for this year, they've already paid for it. They've already invested in it. They don't want that to be diminished because it inflects on what's going to happen next. And maybe their sponsorship of the Summer Olympics is tied to the Winter Olympics, and we've just got that next year. So there's a lot of calculation going on there, and I think it's mostly just economical. We're going to lose, but, you know, what's the worst that what's the least we're going to lose? What's the best way forward? And I guess the calculation has been made that we have the Olympics because people already paid for it. And there's also the calculation of, you know, if we cry uncle first, if Japan cries uncle first, then there's the penalty to be had for canceling the games. Alternatively, if enough of the Olympic teams say, I don't want to go to Japan, the teams are afraid of going there and catching, you know, this new variant, and there's been so many clusters, and let's just not go, then it would probably be an Olympic Committee decision to cancel the games, and then the penalties don't fall on the Tokyo government and the national government. I hope that responds somewhat to your question.
I understand. Well, looks as though the hands are tied at the end of the day. But
yes, the hands are tied, but there's always the knife that's close by. So I keep waiting, and that time, you know, the time to cut and run. Even the people who are facilitating drinks and hot dogs and all of the machinery that goes around the people that are going into the stadium, they still don't have a clear answer yet. They don't know whether to purchase without recourse, you know, the 10,000 hot dogs that they want delivered in 2 weeks, right? They're not in a position to do that. So they're on pins and needles waiting for that other shoe to fall, just like we are. We know that the hands are tied, but we know the scissors are there too. That's why just the mere fact, a couple of things, the Australian softball team coming in, a lot of fanfare. Everybody's very curious. Did you get vaccines? Yes, we got vaccines. Is everybody cleared? Any runny nose? No runny nose, right? And they come in, and then the team from Ghana comes in, and that one guy tests positive for COVID. It just sends shivers down everybody's spines. That's the death knell. We're all going to die, and so we have to cancel the Olympics. So it's a really delicate time. It's
indeed,
yeah.
The uncertainty still lingers, and to be continued.
Yes. So please stay tuned, Tammy. Thank you.
Indeed, will do. Thank you for your candid answer.
Thank you. Tomomi, good morning. If you're in
good
Japan,
morning.
yes.
Yes, good morning. And Kamoshi, your voice is kind of rusty today. You okay? Sore throat or something?
No, I've only had 2 cups of coffee. I thank you for noticing that, but yeah.
Because, you know, your little joke, you know, give me smile always, and I feel comfortable here. Usually I see the guy with tie and suit give me nerve, as you know, I'm regular girl, like maybe oddball here, so your little jokes, I really love it.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. And my question I wanted to ask, your prospect, like when will Japan open its border to international tourists? And will the spread of vaccination speed up the process?
So that's a great question. You know, it's only 2,000 allowed per day right now, and those aren't really tourists. Those are basically business people on essential business. It's Japanese nationals returning home. It's foreigners who are married or who live in Japan, who have residence here, who are coming into Japan. But that's a very, very small number. The likelihood of tourists coming in, the Olympics is not going to trigger that. Although they're beefing up the immigration process, the number of visas that are being issued is at a it's at a 20-year low. So we can tell that the tourists are not coming in. They're not the visas are not being issued, and also the countryside is not welcoming of tourists. I mean, you can go to certain cities in Japan right now, and if you're from Tokyo, they kind of say, please don't come visit us. I mean, even the governor of Tokyo has said that, if you're coming in from other places, please, don't visit us during Golden Week because we've got enough problems as it is. So, dealing with that issue first, so that people aren't, terrified of foreigners coming in, or particularly Chinese coming in. Can you imagine that? Chinese coming in. So if they open the door, the immigration department has an ability to control the people who are coming in from different countries, so they can issue those tourist visas. But I think it's going to be a while, probably more like fall or winter before that begins to happen.
I see, thank you. I'm working for the educational institution and waiting for the exchange student to come in, and reducing number on the international student really hurting education community economically, and student ability to to promote Japanese student to have open mind stuff. So thank you so much, and take care of your throat.
Thank you very much. That's a huge issue that you just put your finger on. The amount of people who are facilitating international education. So there are a couple of international schools here. The teachers come in for a year, maybe 2-year contracts, maybe 3 years. They like it here, but eventually they want to go back. And number one, the ability for them to go back to visit their family, people who are sick, and that sort of thing, and come back is severely restricted. But also the students whose parents are assigned here on a 2 or 3 year contract, the expatriates, and they go back, then they get replaced by other expatriates who have kids and family who come into these international schools. The whole thing is just so much up in the air, and especially with the secondary education. In classroom education is such a huge part of that for high school and middle school, and not to be able to do that, even though you're paying these high school fees, it's a huge crunch, and it just exacerbates mental health issues that are being felt by teachers and counselors and students themselves. So the number of suicides, in fact, in this country has always been high, even among the Japanese population, the foreign population. And over the last 10 months, the area that has seen the most dramatic rise are women and students, under college students. It's just been a huge hit.
Yes.
Wow, thank you. And Yasto, good morning.
Good morning.
If you're in Japan.
I'm in Japan.
Okay, thank you for coming up. So what's your question or comment?
So, Tim brought up with the xenophobic tendency of Japanese countryside regarding COVID, right? And I wonder, it's not only about Japanese politics, but WHO suggests to use Greek alphabet, so but the names of the modified version of COVID, like media always say Indian type of COVID, or Chinese type of COVID, or South American type of COVID, or UK type COVID. Such do you think such change over the neutral way of saying names of COVID will reduce the risk or the tendency of xenophobia in Japan or around the world?
Great question. So there are a couple of things going on here. First of all, out in the countryside, it's not xenophobia per se. I mean, it's directed at other Japanese. If you're from Tokyo, please stay away. And if it's a foreigner, I mean, already there's that layer of just uncertainty with regard to a foreigner. What kind of foreigner? Where are you from? What color is your skin? My God, it's the first time I've seen somebody like that. And you're from Ghana, and do they make chocolate in Ghana? And just stuff like that. But there's always that layer there, and probably after COVID, it's undeniable that there will be some backlash there, particularly with regard to Chinese tourists, which were a huge component of the number of tourists that were coming into Japan. They came in droves and they spent lavishly, and so they were somewhat welcome, except the amount of the numbers that they came was just astounding. You can expect that that's going to happen as well. The nomenclature of it being the China or the Wuhan virus or the Indian virus, you've noticed that they don't even do that in publications anymore. They say it's prevalent in several countries. They kind of conceal that. They don't say it's the Indian virus, and then they give it the numbers. The N152G. You can see that in the newspapers now that they're referring to that particular scientific classification. So that's somewhat helpful. And also in the United States, you see this huge push to, not use pronouns he, she, and don't talk about, the gender specifics, or, there's a lot going on with the language and the use of language. So that seems to be a part of that. It seems to be something that's growing disproportionately in an attempt to kind of address perceived wrongs in the past, or discriminatory policies against men or women or blacks or that sort of thing. So there's a huge social and cultural thing going on in the United States, and it does have an impact elsewhere in the world. I hope that responds somewhat.
Yeah, I agree with that kind of issue is associated with political correctness in Japan and around the world. And I wonder, many English written newspapers use numbers over COVID cases, but when I'm while I'm in Japan, when I see news broadcast, all they say is Indian type or Chinese type or Vietnamese type, British type. So I just wondered, this usage of the COVID cases might facilitate like xenophobic tendencies of Japan. Yeah.
Sure. Well, in certain quarters, that xenophobia is appreciated as a quality of being Japanese. You should. We're an island country. We're a unified country. Everybody has, the same ancestry and the same background, and so there's something to be said for that. Whereas in the United States, it's a multicultural society, and there's just an awful lot going on in American society. But I think in Japan, it's a different kind of mix. And I think xenophobia is not seen as altogether a nasty or a distasteful way of looking at the world. I think the Japanese, some certain segment of the Japanese, feel that it is a healthy way to look at the world, and we should define our own policies without influence of other people or other countries, particularly the United States. We should define our own route forward, and I think there's a growing segment of the population that increasingly feels that way.
Thank you. And, I understand what you are saying totally. Yeah, maybe I
Thank you for listening in.
with somebody else.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we've got Ren. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, Maya. I think we're in the same room somewhere.
Yes.
Thank you for following each other.
Yes.
And
Thank
Timothy,
you.
thank you. And Timothy, good morning. First time in your room. I'm just impressed with the breadth of your knowledge in
Thank you,
Japan. I'm just impressed. So I have to ask this question, and it's more like an opinion, if I can get out of you. Earlier last year, when the I think it was called Diamond Princess, in those days, early days of the pandemic.
It was the launch of COVID in Japan, yes.
Yes, indeed. And Japan wanted to, as you may recall, how do you say, block or prohibit people coming in from China, but Japan always wanted to be a good citizen in the world. So if the WHO is not saying, China is dangerous, Japan couldn't shut down, right? Even though Taiwan and US shut it down right away. Now, WHO just approved China-made vaccine to be formally approved vaccine to be used. And do you think there's a chance that Japan will be starting to accept China-made vaccine?
No.
Or if the China is pressuring Japan, why don't you buy from us? How do you think Japan's government would respond?
With a finger.
Well, that's a beautiful answer, but I really appreciate it. Yeah, and it sounds like you have a strong feeling towards this topic. But if I touched your nerve, please forgive me. But I share.
Oh no, not at all, not at all. So, the animosity between China and Japan is so apparent, and as much as Japan would like to repair that, there are still so many things that are unresolved. And China is the big guy on the block, and their economy is huge, and it impacts the rest of the region. But it's not in line with Japanese freedom, Japanese trade policy, the alliance with the United States, and the issue between the United States and China, which impacts on what Japan is doing. Japan at one point was described as United States aircraft carrier in the Pacific, right? That's kind of a scary characterization, but in some regards, it's true, because the Japanese economy has been enabled to bolster its economy without the need to build the kind of defense and offensive capabilities that the geopolitics would dictate. So it rides under the umbrella of the United States defense. So that's benefited them, but it is an irritant to other people who have other ideas like China. But China launching a vaccine, and seeing if the Japanese have enough vaccines for their entire population. They have so many that they've donated 1 million plus to Taiwan just this last week. I think it's something that we can get into if you want to, but I think the role of the WHO and the United States under Mr. Fauci, and the release of the vaccine, or the release of the virus, and the acknowledgement that it was made in a lab, it's beginning to come open. That can of worms is being opened now, and so the kind of negative feelings that people worldwide are going to start feeling about China and about Mr. Fauci too. It's going to be building steam, and so the Chinese producing a vaccine, yeah, maybe since you created the virus, it enabled you to create the antidote for it. That's in fact, it's a two-part process. But in biological warfare, you create the biological germ, but you also need to have the antidote for it if you're going to use it offensively, because presumably, what in biological warfare, you spread the virus or the germ, and then your soldiers go in, but you need to protect them. So it's a two-part process. So I think there's a lot to be said that will be coming out, and I think it will be virulent and angry, and a lot of animosity is likely to be generated as a result of that. The alternative to that is that we sweep everything under the rug. The United States does, the WHO, the Chinese, and there's nothing to see here, ladies and gentlemen. Please move forward. That's a likely scenario too, and that's the scenario that we have been following. But it's just becoming more and more apparent that the fix was in from the very beginning.
Well, if you allow me to add something, it's a very different reason, but I believe it's a valid reason as well for Japan to recognizing the Chinese vaccines. You may have heard that the European Union has actually allowed or opened the borders of the member countries, but because they've got the vaccination passports, well, they call them health passports, and while it's not just information, there which, information about the passport holder being vaccinated, that's one of the main entries in the passports. But the point is that the European Union recognizes only certain vaccines. And so if you have been vaccinated with Pfizer or Moderna, then you're okay, to travel within the European Union. But the European Union, at least until last week, they did not recognize the Chinese vaccine and the Russian vaccine. So I think that this is going to change, of course, but probably the Japanese government is preparing for opening the borders later this year or in the beginning of the next year by recognizing the Chinese vaccine as well, because we know that, of course, once the borders are open, there will be a huge influx from China. I mean, Chinese visitors will be here. And if the government does not recognize the Chinese vaccine, then there will be, that will be a huge barrier to inbound travel. And Japan is in a bad need of having, inbound tourists. So maybe this is one of the reasons. I may be mistaken, but it looks like a very valid reason to me.
Yeah, Maya, that's a very good point that I missed. This is not only about accepting Chinese vaccine, but also about people who receive the Chinese vaccine can enter Japan or not. That could be a bigger issue down the road, I think.
Yes. So because obviously, as Timothy said, Japan has enough vaccines to inoculate the whole population, and Japan is now producing vaccines, right? So I think it's not a matter of, a shortage of vaccines, so that the country does not need the Chinese vaccine, but they do need Chinese visitors later down the road. So, and as the government is preparing to introduce the health passports for, the Chinese, not only Chinese, for the Japanese overseas travelers and for people who are willing to visit Japan. So this is probably the first step for them to ease that process, of opening the borders.
So do you? Oh, I'm sorry. I just quickly echo what Maya just said. Do you think the European nations will change their policy to accept people who receive Russian or Chinese vaccines down the road as the health positive, should I say, healthy people to enter European nations?
Okay, I think I understand your question a little bit better. When you said accepting the vaccine. I thought you meant accepting them as vaccines into Japan.
Oh no, that's
And-
what I that was what I meant. But then
Okay,
Maya
that's what I thought.
out. That was what I meant for sure. But
Okay.
Maya brought another point which I missed, and I thought
What-
Maya's point was much more accurate.
Yeah. When it comes to accepting the veracity of the vaccine, I think yes, like Maya said, the logistics dictate that assuming it passes the the assessments, which would probably be set up by WHO. I guess globally even the Russian vaccine, which is I haven't heard any criticisms about. It's not one of the approved vaccines for Japan, but you've got to give it to the Russians. They're good at a lot of things, and I would think that their vaccine would be very effective as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And An-chan, good morning.
Hi. Morning. Good morning, Maya-san. Good morning,
Good
Timothy.
morning.
My name is Anne Christini. I live in Fukuoka in Kyushu, and I'm a university teacher here. I really have been enjoying your YouTube channel, Timothy. Thank you so much for all the informative videos. I've learned so much about them.
Yahoo!
It was just, wow. I can't believe it took me so long to find such great information in English. It's just been really an eye-opener for me. So
You get so
Anyway,
many bonus points. Thank you very much.
yeah, it's just it's really hard to find a really good information in English that's so detailed and in depth, and so it's just really great. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. That's not my question, but thank you so much.
No, you're good. You can end there.
I was wondering. I have permanent residency. I've been here for 21 years, and I was wondering if you know anything about. I have no plans to leave Japan anytime soon, but I know that last year from April to September they completely closed the country to reentry for all foreigners, including permanent residents, which was very controversial in the international community. And really made me feel my foreignness for the first time in a long time, actually. But I was wondering, I know that they've eased those restrictions and they're allowing reentry by permanent residents, but in typical Japanese fashion, it's very, in certain cases, kind of vague kind of way of talking. Do you know anything about if permanent residents were to leave Japan for like a family emergency or a funeral or something? Do you know if they would for sure be able to get back in, or is it you can't really have any kind of assurance, or is it kind of a case by case basis? Or do you know anything about that?
No, they have it pretty well established now. You would go to wherever your home country is. You need to have a period of time where you are under observation, and then you can be free in the environment.
Okay.
And then on your preparation for coming back to Japan, you get your PRC test. It needs to be close to the time of your departure.
Okay.
You take it to the airport, you get qualified, you come back into Japan, you get it checked again, and if you're good to go, then you're released. You have to have a login on your iPhone or your cell phone. You have to go to a certain place, depending on the country you come from, to be under observation. Or you can go home. You have to ride a taxi that is a special taxi, or you have to have somebody in your family that picks you up. So they have a set way of doing it, and it used to be pretty bad. The part you're talking about is about 6 weeks ago. And it raised such a brouhaha. All of the chambers of commerce in Tokyo banded together. They presented a letter to the foreign minister and to the METI minister to relinquish and to relax these. So it became a bit of a political issue, and traction was realized. So it's not that bad. But the hard part is not leaving Japan. The hard part is coming in. Whether you're Japanese or whether you're a national, everybody suffers the same.
Okay. So, but there is a pretty high chance that you would get back in? Like, you don't need to worry, oh gosh, am I going to be able to get back in if I leave? You don't need to have that fear, or is there that off chance that you won't be able to?
So that's a kind of a twofold question. Going out and coming back in, they're only allowing a certain number to come in every day.
Oh, that's right. You said that.
Right.
Right.
That's right. So as long as you lined up and you qualified and your plane ticket allows you to come in, then you're okay. That's the first part. The second part is that anything can happen at any time, and all of a sudden the restrictions are removed or they're enhanced or something happens. And yes, the brunt of that, it doesn't fall just on the Japanese, but predominantly it falls on the foreigners, whether you're a permanent resident or a resident, a registered registrant here as well. You know, it's just part of the public policy of Japanese immigration.
So how do they decide? Is it kind of a first come, first served basis as far as the 2,000 people goes per day?
I don't know, but probably you would work with the airlines, and they have certain bereavement allowances.
Okay.
So you would say, look, I'm going to visit a sick parent, and I will be coming back during this time. So before you even leave, you're buying your return ticket too. So you'd probably get in that pecking order. They might not sell it to you until they register you on that seat, and then they would sell you the ticket.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. That was so helpful. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
All right.
There are, we are almost 2 hours into this conversation. There are two things that I wanted to talk about, but we kind of got into the Q&A really quickly. Do you mind if I touch on this? Is Gary still in the room?
Gary?
Yes, I am. I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, Gary, you need to pay attention now. You know, if you start,
I'm listening. I was just looking at some of the bios. I apologize.
Okay. Last week before we signed off, you had a question about Okinawa. So I'd like to address that just very briefly because it is kind of important. And then we've never got to geopolitics, Japanese, what's going on geopolitically in Japan. And so I want to touch on that because it's very important. What's going on in the United States and what goes on in Japan, it is very important. You know, it's probably the most important bilateral relationship in the world. And it's vibrant and things are happening all the time. And of course, all of those participants are listening to this room too. So they're looking for their cues. So one of the big things we just talked about geopolitically is Japan sending 1.2 million vials to Taiwan. That is huge. Geopolitically, that's huge. The relationship between Taiwan and Japan is becoming closer, and it is by design to do that. The other thing is that the Chinese virus, the term that, or the Wuhan virus, I think President Trump liked to call it the China virus, it is becoming more and more an issue of acknowledgement. During the presidential race, the Biden camp was saying this is not something that was created in the lab. It was something that was created through the natural production and natural evolution. And Mr. Fauci, who is prominent in the federal government in the United States, was poo-hooing the idea that this would be created in a lab. And it's just coming out now. I think you might have heard by now that through a Freedom of Information request, 20,000 emails by Mr. Fauci were released. And these emails go back before COVID was a thing. And it's the communications with the White House, probably 7,000 emails to the White House, but the rest of them were with his collaborators and his research associates and people in China about the lab, about the start of the virus and where it emanated from. And it is becoming more and more clear now that he had a vested interest in keeping the fact that the virus was lab created under wraps and diverting attention from that to it being a natural occurring source. And this is a huge issue that's going to have lots of ramifications. So you need to keep watching that and watching the star of Mr. Fauci fall. It will be precipitous over the next couple of weeks. He's suffering badly now in the press. And I think the whole story will come out. And so it's something to keep an eye on. The other thing that's going on is that Biden will be meeting with Putin on June 16th. That's just 10 days away. It will be a heads of state meeting. And these kinds of meetings for the last 4 presidents in a row have not gone altogether well for the United States. Typically, the Russians come out looking a little bit better and gaining a little bit more traction than the United States does. It's a concern for the United States because Mr. Putin is a very strong, very vital and vibrant leader. He has full control of his facilities. He's active and energetic, and he is, pretty much in charge of that country. And him going, head to head with Mr. Biden, who has several, issues. If you've seen him in any press conferences when they allow him to have them, it doesn't look very convincing. So this is a big deal. It's something to watch. There will be pundits on both sides saying, what a fabulous job the United States did and how well he promoted, U.S. interests, and he was tough. There's plenty of time to prepare for that, but Mr. Putin is a true adversary and one that deserves a wide berth. So that is a big issue that's coming up, and also I don't want to fall into a diversion here, but also on June 16th, you might remember that the United States had to acknowledge the appearance of UFOs buzzing ships, military ships, naval ships of the United States, and this has been going on for years. Finally, it went as far as the U.S. Congress, who became alarmed enough about that, and this is only happening over the last 2 or 3 weeks. That the video of these unidentified flying objects and the veracity of the reports. So Congress insisted that the intelligence community report to them about these things. And so that report is coming out around June 16th. So I think you're going to see the top coming off of this issue. And in a lot of things that are just difficult to grasp, difficult to understand, if you come on the other side of an argument, for example, on COVID or the Wuhan virus or the bat sandwiches or whatever, and you come on the wrong side of that, you're criticized as a conspiracy theorist or as a white supremacist or as a racist, that sort of thing. It's a typical attack tactic to diminish the veracity of that argument. But on June 16th, when the Congressional Committee on Intelligence receives these reports, I think you're going to see that this issue is going to become more and more of an open issue. But it's with a lot of things like that, not just COVID, not just a lot of the things that have been of great consternation. You'll see that the naysayers will now have a different platform to speak of. So politics in general, but also the public discourse on a lot of these issues that have great political and social significance will start taking on a new vigor. So although it doesn't happen to deal specifically with U.S.-Japan relations or even with U.S.-Japanese politics, which is the focus of this room, there are things that are happening internationally and geopolitically that have a big impact on what's going on in Japan. So please stay tuned for that. In particular, the Putin-Biden discussion on June 16th. And finally, before I open it up for Q&A, let me address the Okinawa issue that Gary brought up last week. So, as you know, I grew up on Okinawa. I moved there in 1964 when I was a kid, and I left as a young teenager in 1969. And Okinawa at that time still belonged to the United States. It was a protectorate of the United States. And it was maybe 4 or 5 years later that Richard Nixon gave Okinawa back to Japan. And when he did that, a lot of things happened. So when it was occupied by the United States, the Japanese people who lived there, they weren't actually Japanese, they were Ryukyu people. They had to have a passport to go to Japan, to Hondo. They were like a third-class people. They didn't have much representation in Japanese politics at all. And then when the United States gave it back to Japan, they kept certain air bases, military bases, naval bases there as a kind of an exchange for giving back the islands. We will keep these places here to project our power and to protect Japan from nefarious forces in the Asia Pacific. So that happened. The rubbing point here is that of all of the air bases and military support throughout Japan, about 70% of it is in Okinawa. So there's Misawa Air Base, there's a couple of other air bases and military bases elsewhere in Japan, but the lion's share of it is in Okinawa. And the Okinawan people are always saying, how come we have to bear the brunt of that? The national government should give us, a better, better budgets, or they should enhance, Okinawans better than they are doing. But in reality, Okinawa is the poorest prefecture of all prefectures. This tension between the national government and Okinawa. So most people know Okinawa as like a tourist destination, but it's not even really a tourist destination, because the amount of money that it costs to fly from Tokyo to Okinawa to have a family vacation, you can spend the same amount of money and go elsewhere in Asia that's sometimes better than going to Okinawa, because Okinawa is still you're still kind of in Japan, and what you want is something exotic. But it is a beautiful island. The other thing about irritating the Okinawan people with regard to the U.S. presence, that animosity is directed not so much at America as it is at Tokyo, because Tokyo has allowed for that kind of presence to be there. And these bases that are there and the soldiers, there's 80,000 Americans in Okinawa. 30,000 of those are active military. So the rest, the other 50,000, are support. They're teachers, they're doctors, that sort of thing. And it is probably one of the most important bases or facilities outside of the United States in projecting U.S. power. So the rules and the regulations that define how these soldiers operate is called the Status of Forces Agreement between Japan and the United States. So if there's a traffic accident or a robbery or a rape or something like that, that falls under the alignment of Status of Forces Agreement, the judicial way that they deal with that. And so frequently, even the Okinawan police can't be involved in issues involving U.S. soldiers to Japan. So that's a huge irritant to them. But when you look at it, not many people know it, but as a consequence of the end of the war, the United States dominates the airspace above Tokyo as well. So the air flights that are coming in to fly in to Haneda and Narita, that's all pretty much dictated by the United States. The flight patterns, the airspace they can fly into. So it's not all national Japanese territory once you go above the height of buildings. The United States presence in Japan is still very strong and dominant in certain areas. So it rubs Okinawans wrong, and it always creates this kind of animosity. But most of the animosity, as I said, it's the opposition party in fighting against the national government. It just happens that the United States is the vehicle for that complaint. And in fact, the Japanese have always treated Okinawa as a kind of a third party, not giving it the same kind of respect that other prefectures get. I mean, if you think of other prefectures that are more agrarian, they have lesser population, and you put that in context, and still Okinawa is the poorest of all of these prefectures, you do have to scratch your head. At the same time, it's the prefecture that has the highest population rate and the highest longevity of Japan. So it's an interesting place. It is a critical component of the U.S.-Japan relationship. And although there is a move to move the Marines from Futenma to Haneko, they're building this peninsula out there so that they can have the helicopter landing and move the Marines from Futenma to Haneko. This doesn't necessarily mean that this release of all this land that is being surrounded by the Japanese villages and populations and residential areas, that's one of the claims that, there's so many people living nearby and we're in danger of the helicopters crashing and that sort of thing. We want it moved. It doesn't necessarily mean that when the United States relinquishes it for another piece of property that it's going to relieve any of those concerns. It could be that the Japanese government just decides to move self-defense forces into that huge region, or not every region is going to become a Disneyland or is actually suitable for building a Disneyland. But I just wanted to get into that a little bit because Gary asked about the U.S.-Japan relationship with regard to Okinawa and the movement of the Marines from Futenma to Haneko and maybe the near-term prospectus of Okinawa in the U.S. Mix of military presence. But I've long said that the United States will never give up what they have in Okinawa. It's too valuable. It was fought for too hard. There are too many people that died as a consequence of that. And so, although it is administratively Japanese, the Japanese land, it belongs to the Japanese country. I think as a part of the deal that Nixon had was retaining certain footholds there, the status of forces agreement, so that the United States can operate there with relatively a free hand. I hope that deals with some of the issues that you might have had you didn't know much about Okinawa or why it's such an issue. The Okinawan people are always protesting against the American bases there. But if I haven't dealt with that adequately, Gary, I'm open for any questions, and maybe I can touch
a question. What do you think about the idea of the Japanese self-defense forces taking over the majority of bases on Okinawa and having U.S. forces only be visitors there? I think it might alleviate some of the tension, particularly if the self-defense forces were the ones running the show there. And as there are 32 U.S. military bases on Okinawa, and that's, like you said, about 70% of all bases in Japan, it just astounds me that those bases cover 25% of Okinawa Island. I think it's a height of arrogance for a country to think they can have military bases and essentially mini USAs dotted throughout that island area or in another country generally. I think it's time for the United States to respect other countries as being sovereign nations that should be capable of protecting themselves, of course, with assistance from the United States if requested. But your perspectives on that would be welcome.
Thank you. So one of the things you said that is just jumps up as a red flag is, the United States should respect them because, assuming they have the ability to protect themselves. And that's where the rub is. They don't. And for generations, they won't. So even if the self-defense forces occupies those areas that the United States would relinquish, assuming that happens, the self-defense forces isn't large enough to do that. And the self-defense forces, as it is constructed now, with the amount of money that it is dedicated by the national government out of the budget, it doesn't have enough throw weight for replacing what the United States does. The United States spends more in defense capabilities than the next 3 countries combined. So the amount of money that the United States spends, by some interpretation, you could say the Japanese should be very lucky that they have that umbrella to protect them. And it is a deterrent. It's a protective device. It allows the Japanese to focus on other things. But can you imagine if the United States got into a snit with another foreign country in the Asia Pacific, and the Japanese, under certain agreements, were bound to facilitate and support the U.S. effort, and there was any Japanese soldier or naval official killed in action, what that reaction would be like here. The country is just not prepared for that. They're not prepared for death of any soldier. I mean, some of the soldiers that they sent to Africa for peacekeeping, there was such a terror that somebody might die there. So what happens is they go there and they have to support other national forces to be kind of a buffer between themselves and, for example, rebel forces. So it's actually it's not conducive. It's like babysitting. The soldiers are there for peacekeeping purposes, but all the rebels need to do is kill a couple of Japanese soldiers, and the Japanese public would go crazy and withdraw the peacekeeping forces. So there are a couple of issues going on there, but I think the prospect of the United States leaving Japan. I mean, there is an issue about them going to Guam, which gained a certain amount of credibility until they found out that Guam would actually sink if that many soldiers went there. So that one doesn't have much.
Actually, I lived on Guam for 2.5 years, and there was $8 billion set aside by the Japanese government to help Guam with infrastructure, because they really needed to, and they still do need to, strengthen the bridges to be able to handle the multi-ton trucks that the military would introduce. And there was supposed to be 8,000 Marines transferred to Guam, and Guam is still planning on that, actually.
They're probably still doing that, and they probably accepted the money by the Japanese government as a contingency in any event. And they might reduce some of the numbers of active military from Okinawa to Guam, but it's like Guam is not Okinawa. It's that much farther from the action to make Okinawa just the pearl of the Pacific. And I think under those circumstances, it is very unlikely. I mean, the deepwater port of Naha, Kadena Air Base, one of the largest military air bases in the world, in Okinawa. the Marine base in Fatima for expeditionary forces, for land assault, for air and sea. It's just, should something happen, you need to be physically close. And the United States has pretty much relinquished doing anything else with Japanese soil on the mainland. You might remember the Aegis rockets being in Aomori, and Konotaro being involved in the rejection of that because, some of the boosters might fall on Japanese soil as these rockets were delivered. So they had to cancel that. So there doesn't look to be much more room to grow from Hokkaido through Kyushu, but Okinawa is probably, at least we've got that. Let's keep our hands on that. So politically, it's always the opposition that's generating that kind of animosity and the protest marches, and you're taking our lands and you're destroying our lands and you're polluting our lands and that sort of thing. But it's just an irritant. I think no matter what happens, it's not going to move, and it's not Guam is not going to be a replacement for Okinawa.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Thank you. I would like to have a question. Yes.
Or Jovan. Sorry.
Jovan. Jovan is fine. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Maya and Timothy. It's really interesting conversation, and I would like to make a couple of points. I live in Tokyo and in Okinawa, and I go and forth twice a month, even in this pandemic's time. It's been really interesting to see the change of how the perception, at least for myself, to see Americans in the base. The base, the people who are from the base in Okinawa, and before and after the vaccination efforts from the US. Now, before, people in general were afraid of Americans, and there were so many kind of sentiments that Americans couldn't even bring the virus. But now it changed, like completely the other way. Now you see Americans, they're free, going without mask, and everybody seems to be vaccinated. And is this change of mentality, like, wow, like, that's the opposite sense that you live, like you just see, people should be afraid before, and now they are they trust and they feel more safe with Americans. This is so interesting. For instance, in the schools, in Okinawa right now, most of the schools are closed because of the pandemics, but the international schools, they still operating, and the feeling that I get from the parents is so much relief to be among Americans that among Japanese. It's super interesting. And I want just to ask a question about innovation, and related with the COVID also, and last year with this big ship stayed in the port of Tokyo. From my point of view, it was a very lost opportunities in many ways from Japanese government and Japanese scientists. Instead of being, I believe, reactive, they should have had a very leadership position and try to be more on board and to be a game changer on these and take the leadership in the world, creating testing, faster ways of testing, and even create a vaccine. I think they had a perfect setting for the pipeline of opportunities that could have been if there had been, in my opinion, the right leadership in the innovation side for the vaccination from the Japanese government. I feel a little bit disappointment in this regard, because there are so many Nobel laureates in biology here in Japan. The facilities are amazing, and the capacity is here to create this technology for testing and then possibly for vaccination as well. But I just wonder what happened, why the leadership didn't take this amazing opportunity they had to be the leaders on this COVID, and they just let it out and be reactive. If you, Maya, and Timothy have any insight, I would really so appreciate it. Thank you so much.
That's a great question and a great observation, Jovan. The only real response that I can have to you is that there will be elections of the lower house coming up very soon, and I hope you can qualify for candidacy. You know, we're looking for leaders. You're actually putting your finger on it. You know, where the hell are these guys? The opportunity, number one, the opportunity to make this Olympics one of the greatest Olympics of all times. It was kind of offered to us, but I don't think the major companies, the Japan Olympic Committee, took that really to heart, as they did in 1964 to transform the country. I think they had that opportunity. I think it was just a snatch and grab. Their opportunities to make money. Let's make that money. It's the Olympics. I want to get, you know, my company in. I want to get, you know, my revenue developed as a result of that. And I think that we missed the boat on the leadership, which is hard to fathom with Mr. Mori as you know, the leader of the Olympic Committee until he was asked to leave. But that's tongue in cheek, actually. It's painful when you see, and you've got a great perspective going back and forth to Okinawa and coming back here to see that the vacuum of leadership and you know, grabbing the bull by the horns and making the kinds of decisions and inspiring the Japanese population, it just never happened. So anyway, that's my reflection on your observation. But thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Quick question,
Yes.
really.
Thank you so much. If I can help in anything, please, I would love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Just to there's just something I'm kind of curious about with all the U.S. bases in Japan. Has there been any movement within the foreign community to have the U.S. government allow citizens to be vaccinated on the U.S. bases?
Great question. And yes, there has been questions about that. So they have their own supply through diplomatic pouch. And the soldiers have been vaccinated. The diplomats have all been vaccinated, all of the diplomats and the supply personnel who come into the embassy or into the housing compounds, the commissary, they've all been vaccinated. Getting the United States to open their doors would require them to be practicing medicine in Japan if they were letting, like, residents of, like, if you're Dutch or if you're Spanish, going to the Spanish embassy and being inoculated there. That would actually require you know, the practice of medicine, which they're not qualified for under Japanese law, and it's not covered under the agreements. So even though going into the embassy, it is Spanish land, it is Spain within the grounds of the embassy, they wouldn't be allowed to administer medication, especially an injection, under the current understanding of you know, what the diplomats can and can't do.
Even if it's a Spanish citizen going to the Spanish embassy to get vaccinated, they still can't do that?
That's right. So it has been under discussion to allow, because it would be a great thing. It would relieve a lot of the strain. It makes a lot of sense, but it hasn't gained much traction there. I think the Japanese want to be in charge of it. They want to be in charge of securing the supply of doses and for administering them.
Wow, it's very interesting. Thank you so much.
質問させていただいてもよろしいでしょうか。
はい、どうぞ。
そうですね。
ありがとうございます。そうですね。私、そうですね。現在の状況は、あれですね。いろんなところで、コロナなどは、感染しているし、で、最近のニュースによると、あれですね、ウーハンの、ラブから、ウイルスが漏洩されたというニュースもありまして、 で、それについて、あれですね、なんかアメリカと、他の国と、協力して、なんか調査があるかどうかは確認したかったんです。もし調査があるというと、日本も、一緒にその調査する、チームに入るかどうかを知りたかったです。そして、もう、一つの質問は、ですね、もし日本と中国とか、なんか、あれですね、なんか戦争とか、戦争と、それを、極限ですけど、なんかあったら、アメリカの行動はどうなりますか？日本の守るとか、それとも、その二人の中の交渉とか、どうなるかとか、それも知りたかったです。そして、分断として、もう一回の質問は、もしアメリカと一緒になんか宇宙人などを来たら、先ほどティモティさんがUFO などの話をしましたので、言ったらメカの開発などをしてくれれば、もちろん日本でそれできると思います。そうだったらよく対策できればなと思いました。すみません、ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much, Navin.
Thank you. I think that we touched upon the first question, your first question, a little bit earlier today. So, well, I don't know, Timothy, would you like to talk about this again, or just? I'm sorry, Navin, because well, I'm not sure you heard it, but these conversations are recorded and they're uploaded on Japan Expert Insights, the website there. So you can go there and, have a listen there. So because we are well into that's the third hour of this conversation. So sorry for this, but probably.
わかりました。もうその話がされてるのが全然問題ないです。ありがとうございます。
Thank you.
No, welcome, Navin. And I see that you're the first time caller, first time for you to join this room. So, yeah, all of your questions are good. This thing that's going on with Wuhan and the identification of the source of the virus and the impact of that, and the Japanese getting into a snit with China, it's highly unlikely. But the United States and weaving in Japan is a more likely scenario. And your question about the UFO, thank you very much for that. I always get yelled at by Maya after our call. She says, stick to Japanese politics. Nobody's that interested in the UFOs, and that's mostly going on in the United States. But my assessment is that, it is important. If it does come out that this is that the cover is off the barrel, and that this in fact is that is world altering, and I sense that that's coming down the path. So that's why I'm talking about it, because it is so potentially critically important, and I want people to watch that and pay attention to it, because yes, it's huge actually.
Yeah, Tim, actually, even 60 Minutes took a serious look at that, and then you may want to encourage people to watch 60 Minutes on YouTube, which is available to be watched from Japan. So, if serious news media like 60 Minutes taking into account, then you are not the only one who is serious about this.
That's right. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. And Aya, I'm sorry that we have kept you waiting for such a long time. I hope you're still there.
Hi, good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you for having me here. Okay, I have just want to know, I'd like to know what you guys think about Tokyo Olympic organizers are distributing 160,000 free condoms for Olympians. It's like 14 condoms per Olympians, and I think, in my opinion, I think it's ridiculous, since we have to social distancing, and all the restaurants are not even allowed to serve any kinds of alcohol to customers, and they're also allowed to bring their own alcohols to the facilities, and it just doesn't add up to me. So I just want to know, what do you guys think about that?
That's an interesting question.
What sizes were the condoms?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but it's
I'm
hundred.
just kidding.
Yeah, I know. I wish I
You
would
nailed
say,
it.
well, but yeah, I'm not sure, but it's over 160,000 condoms per for Olympians, and they don't even have to quarantine themselves for 2 weeks. So, and they're allowed to bring their own alcohol to the facilities, and now they're getting like free condoms for 14 condoms per Olympian. So I just since we're in the pandemic and we have to social distancing, and now they're saying that they are allowed to bring their own alcohol too. So I just want to know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, it's a touchy subject, I guess. I don't mean that figuratively. The fact that you've got all these athletes that are coming into Japan, it's probably not inaccurate to say for the first time for them to travel to Japan, and for some of them maybe I guess they've been international athletes and competing internationally, so it's not the first time out of their country, but coming to Japan, and staying here for a week or 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks, touring the country and participating in maybe the Paralympics, but probably just being so happy that they don't have to train every day anymore. They don't have to listen to their coach. The Olympics are finished. They are released. Can you imagine what that's like? And they don't even know what the word condom is. And so traveling around with their friends or whatever, it is likely that they might run out of their supply. I don't know. But I guess it's kind of foresightful to provide those just in case. And everybody gets them because you're going to be here for a couple of days. And if you don't want them, that's okay. It's just part of your, what do you call that when your courtesy pack? You get your Japanese fan and you get a little bit of knickknacks and you get your 16 condoms. I don't know. I think there's a lot of wacky things that go on here, but maybe it's a prudent move.
Well, it's difficult to answer that. I mean, my personal opinion, if you don't mind me sharing it with you, is, well, they say that all the Olympians will be vaccinated by the time they come to Japan. And I find it difficult to believe that those Olympians, who are going to be in the Olympic Village for, I don't know, a certain amount of time, that they're going to distance. Well, it's really difficult to believe. And well, that, having the condoms, it's a tacky subject. And well, since they're not going to distance anyway, probably that's a prudent thing to do, well, I'm sure that everybody has an opinion on this, but well, obviously, there are a lot of things which we have an opinion about, and well, they're not going to happen anyway. So at least, we can be sure that the condoms will do their job, if not, curb the spread of COVID or whatever. But the Olympians are going to be vaccinated anyway. So, well, probably it has nothing to do with COVID, right?
Yes, but they're not allowed to, move around. They have to be stuck in the facilities. And now our government is saying that they're not allowed to use their condoms. They give out free condoms because they want them to bring back to their own country. So they're not allowed to use those condoms in Japan while they're in Japan. So it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it doesn't really, but well, Jake, I see that you're flashing your mic.
Yes, if I may, it seems to me they're Japanese condom companies that produce excellent and maybe best in the world in terms of thinness products, and it's a promotional opportunity for them. I haven't myself checked whether they're donating them, as is often the case at the Olympics, or if they're being purchased. But in either event, it would seem to me to be a marketing decision on their part and a good thing in terms of promoting Japanese businesses in that way. And the issue of whether they get used in an irresponsible manner
by the athletes individually is a whole other thing, with the caveat that we as a society get a whole lot of things out of the spectacle of the human actions of the athletes. And there is, I think, a reasonable limit of our privacy intrusions into what they are doing when they're not on the court or on the field. It's my thought, but I would say I think it's a good thing for the Japanese companies to go ahead and be able to take advantage of the Olympics for product promotion.
I actually didn't think about it as product promotion, but now that you mentioned it, Aya, that's a great, wow! If you could be a company that would be able to get into the courtesy pack for all of the Olympians, this product, and yeah, the funny thing is it's got a use by date, kind of the opposite of that is you can't use it until you go back to your home country. Who's going to pay attention to that? But it's an interesting marketing ploy. It just, wow, that's really great.
Yes, and for Japanese condom companies, they're giving it free.
That's right. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is they've had camera crews watching, at the Olympic Village, where the women are located and where the men are located, and the amount of activity of people, trying to sneak in or to get in or get dressed up as a girl and go into the women's dormitory and that sort of thing. This is an incredibly sexually active population, and people are very interested in that. So I think it's just, it's just inevitable. Maybe it's just an acknowledgement of what is likely to happen. I mean, they've been studying this for, in Brazil and in all of the other Olympics that have gone on. So I think they have a track record of knowing how people act in this kind of environment. But it's an interesting topic. I'm glad you brought it up, Aya.
Thank you.
すみません、確認したいんですけど、じゃあそのコンドムは無料でもらってるコンドムは日本で使えないということ。
That's what apparently she said, yeah. So now that I
じゃあそれはどうやって追跡できるんですか。
That's my whole point.
でもね、ある意味でそのコンドムをいただいてるから、それをもらって自由な行動を取る、そういうことですね。英語でそれもしコンドムはあげられないとか、もう一度皆さんがプロテストしてそれをもういただけないようになったら、それは英語でコックブロックということになっちゃうかと。すみません、ちょっと
No, it's funny. It's very funny. So listen, as thank you for teeing this up. I will follow this issue, and maybe we can report on it as the Olympics unfolds to see how that story develops. It's really a kind of quirky thing about so many things that are quirky here in Japan. But like I said, thank you for teeing it up. Let's not dwell on it anymore.
At the sake of being mundane, I wanted to get your perspective on what seems to be the revitalization of TPP, and also how that would interact with the beginning negotiations between Australia, India, United States, and Japan.
Okay, great question. So TPP is kind of on the boards again. It's on the boards in two different ways. Actually, three now that you've mentioned Quad. But the Trans-Pacific Partnership is what the TPP is. It had great momentum until Trump became president, and his mantra was, America first. So why the hell are we relinquishing certain things so that you guys can benefit from it? Screw you. What's in it for us? So that was basically the mantra, and TPP died on the planning boards. And also, it's interesting, the current foreign minister was the chief negotiator in TPP at that particular time, Amari. So he's got a bit of a legacy. He is being mentioned by former Prime Minister Abe as a potential, one of the 4 potential contenders for Prime Minister should Suga decide not to run or for whatever reason. So he is a trade proponent, Mr. Amadi is. He's the current foreign minister, as I said. TPP, after the United States pulled out, went into a different kind of a variation. I can't remember what the acronym was for it, but it began to get traction. And now the United States says, now we're finished with Trump. We want to get back into the World Trade Organization. We want to join these organizations that Mr. Trump evilly and illegitimately got us out of, and we want to join these organizations again. So the Biden administration is going forward on that. So TPP might come up again as well. It is being discussed as a venue for trade facilitation. There are just so many other issues that are going on at the same time. Quad is a separate issue. Quad is basically a bulwark to be against the encroachment of China. So the United States feels it can't do it by itself. Even with Japan, it needs other collaborators. Australia being a little bit far away, but militarily it could provide some muscle, and certainly India. So they're building that coalition there. It's not a trade coalition, but it could be supported by trade and investment components of a military alignment.
From what I understand, TPP originally was an idea that the countries in the Pacific Rim would be able to join together in opposition to China. One of the tenets of the TPP was you had to be a democracy, and that essentially eliminated China from this EU-like organization.
Oh, sure. It was to thwart the encroachment of China, and they're their juggernaut in trade and production and manufacturing. All the countries are relying on that because labor was cheap, manufacturing and the pollution controls made the ability for them to produce them below market made them the darling. So everything was produced in China, and I think maybe it has seen the heyday, and that people are going to retract from that, and assuming that there is energy gains, which is something that the United States and every country is working on, reliance on coal and oil and cleaner and better energy sources, just distancing themselves from reliance on China.
Hey, on the TPP, UK wants to join us. I welcome them. What are your thoughts on that? Tim and Gary, I guess.
I've heard that too. In fact, UK and France both were being. There was discussion among TPP members and France and England.
Yeah,
I think that would be wonderful. It would certainly boost the power of the TPP group.
Yeah, Gary, France is new to me. I know UK is actively looking into joining TPP. So France is trying to do the same?
That's what I've heard, yes. In fact, just this week.
Interesting. Yeah. Not sure what someone like Maya would be thinking, because Maya is more familiar with European nation. My understanding was UK can do this because they are not part of the EU. So if France wants to join TPP, that's quite interesting to me.
Yes, that's indeed interesting. And there have been some tension between the United Kingdom and the EU after Brexit, right? But at the same time, there is that notion in the European countries that they do need to get less dependent on production in China. And so there is recently, during the past 10 to 12 months, the past 1 year, there have been talks in the European Union, that they have to find ways to actually what's that? How do you call it? To really become less dependent on Chinese production, on Chinese or trading with China. So I'm not surprised that France, has voiced such willingness to join TPP, and of course with Great Britain exiting the European Union, they have to find new ways, to boost their trade, economy, and so on. So it's not surprising, really. I think that, as Timothy said, we're going to see, a greater movement, stronger movement among the rest of the world, especially, it's obvious in the United States, but also the European countries and the European Union, to just get, more competitive in terms of, competing with China and the Chinese market there. So I don't know whether it makes any sense to you, and if it's not really a very informative opinion, but we're certainly going to see these tendencies, get stronger in the near future.
And the next one, maybe Germany.
Yes. Even though Germany is still on the verge, they I think that they are not decided which way to go. But at the end of the day, if more European Union countries or members, they decide to follow France and actually, the example of Great Britain, then probably Germany will eventually get to on the side of trying to get less dependent on China too. Okay, so thank you very much for this question. And I see we've got Monica. Monica, are you there? Hello. No, probably she's busy right now. Okay, so
Yeah, I think she was one of the official interpreters for Olympics, but she had to withdraw. So yeah, that's what she said.
oh, thank you for that and the information. Well, obviously she is busy right now, and thank you very much everybody for joining today. It's been almost 3 hours since we opened this room, and I would like to wrap things up and say that once again this Japanese Politics 101 room has been recorded. It will be uploaded on the Japan Expert Insights, where you can listen to parts of it or the whole of it. I know it's almost 3 hours long, and it's it takes a lot of time, for everybody to listen to, but let's see. And Timothy, thank you very much for all the wonderful analysis today.
Thank you, Maya.
And thank you very much for living up to the beat in the promo video. No reaction. Okay, so sorry for that then. I was trying, to pull your leg, but okay. So, we are going to hopefully to see you again next week with more of the Japanese politics and more hot topics. We'll be closer to the Olympics. We'll be closer to the end of the current session of the Diet. So we'll see. There will be definitely more news and more things to talk about. With this, thank you very much again. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the next week too. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Timothy.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you.